Good afternoon, everyone, for all participants and all our distinguished panelists. My name is Mohammed Salah Subki. I'm sitting in for Dr. Hafiz Salmawi, who has some health emergency family issues, so he is not able to join us today. But I'm a colleague of Dr. Hafiz in the same project on the technical and financial support technical and financial to the renewable energy and energy efficiency energy sector in Egypt. Today we are continuing the series of webinars which the project have started a few times ago, and it's called Egypt's role in mitigating and adapting to the effects of the climate crisis in view of the upcoming COP26 in both the energy and transport sector. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, our webinar today is on Egypt's role in mitigating and adapting the effects of climate change in view of upcoming COP26. We are lucky and honored to have His Excellency Ambassador Christian Berger, EU Ambassador and head of the EU delegation to Egypt, with us today. In addition to that, we have two key persons in the energy sector in Egypt, Mr. Osama Mubaris, Undersecretary for Technical Office, Ministry of Petroleum and Mineral Resources, and General Secretary of the East Mediterranean Gas Forum, and Dr. Ahmed Mehina, First Undersecretary of the Ministry of Electricity and Renewable Energy for Research, Planning, and Authorities Follow-up. It is honor and pleasure to invite His Excellency Ambassador Christian Berger, EU Ambassador and head of the EU delegation to Egypt, to provide his opening speech. Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Suki. It's a great pleasure being here, and I'm very pleased to be here with the Secretary General of the GF and the Undersecretary. So, dear participants, my very warm greetings and thanks for your participation in this green webinar that will discuss Egypt's contribution to the reduction of greenhouse gases in various sectors and its action plan to reduce those emissions. Already before the corona pandemic, and even more so now, the Green Deal is one of the top priorities of the European Union. It strives to make the EU climate neutral by 2050, but we cannot do this alone. We cannot do this without our neighbors. We need to cooperate on a wide range of issues with our partners and neighbors. On our side, the EU has laid the foundation for a transport system which will achieve its goal of a green and digital transformation and will be more resilient to future crisis situations. As outlined in the European Green Deal, this approach would result in a 90% cut in emissions by 2050, delivered by a smart, competitive, safe, accessible, and affordable transport system. Inspired by the Green Deal, the EU aims to support Egypt on expanding its transport infrastructure based on sustainability. The EU's energy cooperation with Egypt will take into account the profound geoeconomic and geopolitical shifts that are set in motion, not least by the energy transitions around the globe. The aim of such cooperation is to help us adapt to this new paradigm. The EU is keen on partnering with Egypt to support ambitious plans developing a green economy. This attention stems from the EU's commitment to support low-carbon, resource-efficient, and socially inclusive policies. Climate is already at the forefront of Egypt's development policy. At the regional level, Egypt ratified the Paris Agreement in 2017 and was the initiator of the African Renewable Energy Adaptation Strategy. In November 2020, Egypt proposed to host COP27, which was endorsed by the African heads of states and should now be approved by COP26. The National Council for Climate Change, which is well established, plays an important role in all this. It aims to integrate national efforts to implement plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions while bringing up-to-date adaptation strategies to reduce the adverse effects of climate change. The National Strategy for Climate Change will be an important planning tool. Already now, Egypt is taking important strides towards the green economy and sustainability by encouraging ecotourism, promoting biodiversity, reducing plastic waste, and curbing down on greenhouse gas emissions. The successful 5-year green bonds will certainly diversify Egypt's investor base and make people aware of progress achieved in this field. Proceeds will be used to finance public green projects in different sectors, such as transport and in energy as well. Let me be a little bit more concrete on what EU-Egypt cooperation is about in energy and transport just ahead of COP26. It includes important infrastructure projects such as the third phase of the third metro line in Cairo, the upgrading of the Alexandria tramway, Gulf of Suez and Gulf of Said wind farms, reducing refinery emissions such as the Suez oil refinery, and the expansion of electricity and gas grids. It also includes large and medium-sized technical assistance to support reforms in this sector at large. We also supporting the private sector together with the EBRD through very successful green economy financing facilities. Let me finish with a quick word about what is coming next. In the framework of our multi-annual planning, which stretches from 21 to 27, we will be working with Egypt on a number of Team Europe initiatives in transport, energy, digitalization, and in the water sector. Aspects of climate and sustainability will have more weight and will be cornerstones in all our initiatives. In this respect, I would like to underline that we are willing to support Egypt in drafting its national hydrogen strategy and its third national energy efficiency action plan. Other green infrastructure projects that will be covered by our cooperation include urban transport projects, logistics centers, electricity transmission control centers, and numerous capacity building projects. Together, we hope we will be able to deliver a critical mass of green economy investment and technical assistance projects across key sectors, generating positive economic-wide effects. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the deliberations of this workshop and the outcome, and of course the future implementation in a close cooperation between the European Union and Egypt. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for this encouraging words and for reflecting a very positive cooperation with Egypt in the different sectors and in the area, specifically in the area of mitigation of climate change. Thank you very much for your contribution today, Your Excellency. Now we can move to our first two distinguished speakers. We'll be listening to His Excellency Mr. Osama Mubarak, Under-Secretary for Technical Office, Ministry of Petroleum and Mineral Resources, and Mr. Mubarak also is the Secretary General for the East Mediterranean Gas Forum. Please, Mr. Mubarak, the floor is yours, and we are eager to listen to you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Sobki. Thank you, Your Excellency, Ambassador Berger. It's really a pleasure to be here among you in this significant event. First, I would like to thank the EU delegation for their efforts in organizing this important event and bringing us together to tackle such a significant global topic. I would also like to extend my appreciation to the EU for their strategic partnership with Egypt's oil and gas sector, especially in regards with climate change related topics, and also for their support to the East Mediterranean Gas Forum, EMGF, which is the second hat that I wear, which was recently established as a regional intergovernmental organization based in Cairo, Egypt. So in recent years, there has been an increased global conviction that addressing climate change is no longer a choice, but a necessity. This is especially reinforced in view of the persistent outbreak of extreme weather conditions, severe flooding and wildfires witnessed across different parts of the world. The global efforts to mitigate the outbreak of COVID-19 have also supported a common goal of building back growth, but both better and greener. Accordingly, climate change is now on top of the agenda of most of world governments, and most countries are taking bold steps towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The Egyptian government is also similarly addressing climate change with significant importance and strongly embracing the energy transition and the green economy. This was highlighted during the World Leaders Summit on Climate Change earlier this week, as His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi emphasized that adaptation to climate change is a top priority for Egypt and also for Africa, which suffers greatly from its most severe consequences. In this respect, Egypt's oil and gas sector has been always keen to continuously improve the environmental footprint of its activities. As a cleaner and more environmentally friendly fuel, natural gas has been the fuel of choice. It has become increasingly more important, and now it accounts for nearly 65% of the total consumption of hydrocarbons in Egypt. Egypt's oil and gas sector views climate change not as a challenge, but more as a promising opportunity to create more value across the sector's full value chain. Therefore, the sector already implemented several actions and initiatives to capitalize on such opportunities. These include developing, in collaboration with the Ministry of Electricity and Renewable Energy, Egypt's Integrated Sustainable Energy Strategy 2035, which is now being updated to 2040 with the support of the EU. This strategy focuses on implementing a diversified and sustainable energy mix, boosting the contribution of natural gas as a cleaner fuel, as well as boosting renewable energy. The sector has also paved the way for Egypt to join the World Bank's initiative for zero routine flaring by 2030. In line with the global efforts toward using hydrogen as a clean energy source, both the Ministry of Petroleum and the Ministry of Electricity are key participants in the cross-ministerial committee that was formed to develop Egypt's national hydrogen strategy. And in this regard, I would like to thank Ambassador Berger for his support and the EU's willingness to support Egypt in developing this strategy. Also, I would like to reiterate that along Egypt's oil and gas sector energy transition journey, the Ministry of Electricity continues to be a key partner, particularly with its increased focus on expanding renewable energy generation and green hydrogen. On the regional front, the EMGF launched two primary decarbonization initiatives: natural gas industry decarbonization in the East Med, and promoting LNG as a cleaner fuel for vessels. Furthermore, the EMGF is working on articulating its long-term strategy, taking into consideration the accelerated shift towards energy transition. Collaboration between governments and relevant industry stakeholders is a key principle for the EMGF, because eventually it is the companies in the private sector who will do most of the activities and the investments. Accordingly, the Gas Industry Advisory Committee, GIAC, was established to act as the main platform for this collaboration. Most of the major international oil companies operating in the region are already members of the GIAC. With their access to capital and state-of-the-art technologies, these IOCs can play a key role in executing projects that would accelerate unlocking the full potential of the East Med Basin. In addition, their role to supporting the EMGF initiatives for regional gas decarbonization. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I would like to emphasize that the Egyptian Ministry of Petroleum will continue collaboration with both local and international partners and all the relevant stakeholders to support the global efforts towards achieving the Paris Agreement goals. Finally, I look forward for favorable outcomes of the imminent COP26 meeting and for reinforced actions from the following COP27 meeting that will be hosted in Egypt. I wish you all fruitful discussions and a successful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Mr. Mubarak, for this clear vision. And thank you very much for emphasizing the cooperation on the national level, regional level, as well as the international level. And thank you for pointing out the effort of the EU in supporting Egypt's effort in the providing the new energy mix, the updated energy mix, and Egypt's activities to meet the climate change challenges. Thank you very much. Having said that, now we move to our second distinguished speaker. It is Dr. Ahmed Mehina, the first Undersecretary for Research and Planning Authorities Follow-up, the Ministry of Electricity and Renewable Energy. And Dr. Mehina, the floor is yours. So please, we're listening to you.
Thank you, Dr. Sobki. His Excellency Christian Berger, European Union Ambassador and head of the EU delegation to Egypt. Ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, I have the pleasure to be with you today in this important event, and I would like to express my deep gratitude to European Union delegation to Egypt for organizing this important event to share ideas and experiences, as well as strengthen our strategies in addressing the effects of the climate crisis in view of the upcoming COP26. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Earth is experiencing extraordinary scale of extreme weather events such as heat waves, floods, wildfires, and pandemics. It is a clear warning and a message. So we should act now to move into a low carbon future as pledged in the Paris Agreement. These are drivers which lead us to energy transition, which will require changing in the form of production and consumption of electricity. The global energy transition is more than a simple transformation of the energy sector. It is multi-dimensional transition and is evolving in terms of technologies, socio-economics, institutional drivers, and forms of finance. The Paris Agreement sets out a global framework to avoid dangerous climate change by limiting a global warming to below 2 degrees and pursuing efforts to limit it to 1.5 degrees. It also aims to strengthen countries' ability to deal with the impact of climate change and support them in their efforts. The agreement provides a pathway for developed countries to assist developing countries in their climate mitigation and adaptation efforts, while creating a framework for the transparent monitoring and reporting of countries' climate goals. Ladies and gentlemen, Egypt has a high degree of risk to natural hazards and is highly vulnerable to climate change impacts. Egypt's Nile Delta is recognized as one of the world's 3 extreme vulnerability hotspots. Future projections indicate Egypt will suffer from sea level rise, water scarcities and deficits, as well as an increase in the frequency and intensity of extreme weather, events such as heat waves, sand and dust storms, flash floods, rock slides, and heavy rains. Key sectors impacted include water resource, agriculture, fisheries, health, housing, biodiversity, energy, tourism, telecommunications, and coastal zones. From long time ago, Egypt's electricity sector had a lot of measures in the field of mitigation as it started its transition to low carbon electricity sources. It relies basically on exploiting renewable energy sources and contribute significantly to improving energy efficiency, securing electric supply, and reducing emissions. Egypt approved its vision to 2030 and Sustainable Energy Strategy 2035 in order to diversify the power supply, meet energy demands, and exploit the country's resources potentials. The Integrated Sustainable Energy Strategy for 2035 was approved, in which the share of the renewable energy in the energy mix will reach 42% by 2035. Now we will achieve 1 year ahead of the schedule our first target by reaching renewable energy capacities to 20% from the expected maximum peak load. And now we are reviewing and updating the strategy by excluding the coal and replacing its capacity with renewable energy sources. In this context, Egypt is rich in renewable energy resources, especially wind and solar, that qualify it to be one of the major renewable energy producers. There is about 7,650 kilometers square have been allocated for implementing renewable energy projects with expected potential of 90 gigawatt from renewable energy, wind and solar. To achieve our ambitious vision in utilizing the renewable energy resources, a lot of procedures has been taken and incentives offered to encourage private sector participation in sector projects. As a result, 32 international and local investors were involved to implement Bimban Solar Power Park project, the largest one in the Middle East and Africa, located in one place, in Aswan, with total capacity 1,465 megawatt. The project won the best project prize worldwide by the World Bank. In addition to above mentioned measures in the field of renewable energy, the sustainable energy transition will be enabled also by using energy efficiency measures. In this regard, during the last few years, the electricity sector in Egypt has taken the following measures to enhance energy efficiency in supply side. Building 3 mega power plants project of 14.4 gigawatt with high efficiency, around 60.5% as efficiency. Also converted simple cycle power plants into combined cycle power plants by adding 1,850 megawatt. Also usage of supercritical steam technology and applying programmed maintenance systems for the components of the generation plants. Due to these measures, the fuel consumption reduced from 214 gram per kilowatt hour in 2016 to be now around 180 gram per kilowatt hour. In addition, we are focusing on the improvement and upgrading the transmission and distribution networks, including extra high voltage, substations, control centers, as well as smart grids. Our strategy is relying on transformation to smart grids. which will contribute significantly to improve electricity efficiency and reduce carbon emissions, as well as reduce the investment required for infrastructure for electrical networks. Ladies and gentlemen, recently we are working in different technologies that will help us in our energy transition way as waste to energy, e-mobility, smart grids, water desalination by using renewable energy and energy storage in addition to clean hydrogen. Where is a high-level working group from various ministries has been formed to set a roadmap for future steps for using hydrogen. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like here to mention that there is a need to work in the way of adaptation actions in parallel with mitigation actions, because as all of you know, the African countries are the most vulnerable countries by the effects of climate change. So there is important need to support Egypt to adapt with these dangerous phenomena. Especially the Paris Agreement put a base of balance between adaptation and mitigation actions. We look forward to COP26 meeting, which will held in Glasgow. We trust that organizing and supporting this event by United Kingdom government will push towards achieving the goals to reduce the impact of climate change. In this context, the Egyptian electricity sector is cooperating with the Energy Transition Council to achieve our common targets in order to enhance the transition to clean energy. 3 working groups on renewable energy, energy efficiency, and technology innovations established in cooperation between Ministry of Electricity and Renewable Energy and Energy Transition Council to discuss and develop specific offers for the government of Egypt in the lead up to COP26. The regional integration is one of the fundamental pillars of the sustainable development in the long term. We just need to work together in order to create a conducive environment for the achievement of sustainable development and exploiting the win-win opportunities for regional and international cooperation. Finally, I am sure that we will work together to continue our fruitful cooperation for the welfare of our countries. I wish you successful meeting and constructive discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mehina, for this enlightening information, and thank you for highlighting once again the high level of cooperation, the coordinated cooperation on the national level with the different ministries, as well as the regional level and the international level. And we are looking for a positive contribution from Egypt on the international level on regarding climate change and climate change mitigation. Thank you very much, Dr. Mehina, for your contribution. Now, respected Your Excellencies, respected Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, it's our pleasure in the EU-supported project to Egypt on technical and financial sustainability of renewable energy and energy efficiency sectors to resume our program of monthly webinars on different important topics related to energy transition in Egypt. The target of this program is to brainstorm and discuss among professionals and stakeholders recent developments in energy transition on the local, regional, and international level. This will help better understand the features, drivers, and causes of the energy transition, such that Egypt can benefit from them to achieve its targets as they come into the Sustainable Development Strategy 2030 and the integrated sustainable, sorry, sorry for the interruption. in the energy transition that Egypt can benefit from them to achieve its targets as they came in the Sustainable Development Strategy 2030 and the Integrated Sustainable Energy Strategy of Egypt 2035, which is also currently being updated. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, challenges of climate change is the main driver for energy transition. According to the IPCC, electricity generation and heat are responsible for 31% of the global greenhouse gases emissions. Yet if the overall energy production of all types is considered, including manufacturing, transportation, fugitive emissions, and other fuel combustions, the share shall approach 72% of the global greenhouse gases emission. Adding industrial processes and bunker fuels, the share will exceed 80%. Environmentally friendly power sector is in specific and energy sector in general through high share of renewable energy is not just an objective. It became a necessity, and Egypt is working on that. Energy efficiency in the demand sector, specifically in the transportation and building sectors, is very much needed to close the circle of energy supply and demand. All of us know in next COP26 will assemble in Glasgow, UK. This conference came in the wake of a summer which we suffered from highly spread wildfires, record-breaking heat, and floods across the world. As USA returned to the Paris Agreement, this will add to the momentum of the COP26. Finally, we all know in Egypt is targeting to host COP27, and hopefully that will be blessed and approved in COP26. We will start the presentation, and we highly appreciate the time and effort of our distinguished and respected speakers who will share their deep knowledge with us today, as shown in the agenda, which was distributed to you. They will cover our today's topic from different technical and financial perspective. I would kindly ask all the speakers to maintain the maximum 15-minute time slot to allow participants in the webinar for some contribution and some clarification. Our first distinguished speaker is Mrs. Randa Munir. Mrs. Munir is an environment and climate change expert with over 25 years of experience in the field of environment management, consulting, and working in private sector. She served as a senior advisor to the Egyptian Ministry of National Cooperation files addressing climate mitigation, sustainable development, and environmental management. She also served as the director of Green Climate Unit Fund Egypt, where she oversaw climate financing in Egypt and supported local projects that respond to the challenges of climate change and Egypt's sustainable development. Currently, Mrs. Munir is the climate change policy manager for the British Embassy in Cairo, leading on climate engagement plan with Egypt for COP26 and advising post on all climate change and green projects in Egypt. Prior to moving to Egypt, Mrs. Munir worked and lived in Canada, where her experience spans environmental consulting issues, as well as multinational with entities such as Schlumberger, Talisman Institute. She worked in North Africa, Japan, Europe, and the Arab world. She implemented several projects and With that, I would like to invite, also Mrs. Munir holds a master's degree in environmental engineering from the Imperial College of Science and Technology in London, UK. Mrs. Munir, the floor is yours and we are eager to listen to you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Professor. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have a pleasure to be on the panel today and have this presentation, especially in the run-up to COP26. We're all excited. We have a few more weeks to come for COP26. Lots of cooperation between Egypt and the UK, especially on the energy portfolio. I will start by talking about the climate change and our goals, main goals for COP26 this year. And then I'll narrow it down to the Energy Transition Council, the role, objective, and what we have achieved so far with Egypt. So we already know what we are aiming for. Back in 2015, the world signed the Paris Agreement, an international deal to tackle climate change and crisis, trying to reduce the temperature to 1.5 degrees. So
I'm sorry, Mrs. Randa, 1 second. Would you like me to share your presentation?
Yes, please.
Okay, perfect. Just a second, please.
Thank you. We have a presentation mode. And well, thank you very much. Thank you, Maria. Right. So we're aiming to for the 1.5 degrees, and we've seen the most recent report, the IPCC report, on the goals. And then for COP26 this year, Conference of Parties will be the world's best chance for building a cleaner, greener future for COP26. As you know, I mean, COP26 must unite the world on a path to a zero carbon economy. As we build back better from COVID, we are at a turning point for our planet and our health. In Glasgow, that will happen in the coming few weeks in November, and it will come to the health of our planet. Every day counts. The UNFCCC is the main forum for countries to discuss, take action on climate change. This year, we are hosting, the UK is hosting COP26 at Glasgow in November 2021 and co-hosted by Italy for the pre-COP events. According to the UK government, COP26 will be the largest summit the UK has ever hosted, with over 330,000 delegates, including world leaders, experts, campaigns, and government officials. The main 4 goals of COP26, we have the first goal is to put the world on a path to driving down emissions until they reach a net zero by the middle of this century. The second goal is to protect the people and nature. Thirdly, to mobilize finance, which is a key challenge to climate change, to tackle climate change. And our fourth goal is working together. We'll stay on the first slide, please, Praveen. What is the UK-Egypt engagement on climate? So far, we have a strong relation with Egypt on climate and in delivering the success of COP26 being the top international priority. The main 2 priorities for COP26 themes with Egypt particularly is on adaptation and resilience and energy transition. From there, we have 5. So the negotiations part on NDCs and long-term strategies to net zero is our key priority on the negotiation side of things. But when it comes to the campaigns, we have 5 campaigns, again, with the 4 goals that I've just mentioned. The 5 campaigns starts with the adaptation and resilience. Secondly, the energy, which is a big portfolio with Egypt. Egypt being a leader in the region with all the advanced work they've done on energy and renewables and phasing out coal specifically. The third campaign is the finance and then nature-based solutions as well as transport. So what emerged from the energy campaign was the Energy Transition Council. The Energy Transition Council was created and established by the UK as one of the main initiatives of its COP26 presidency. We can have the next slide, please. The ETC is chaired by the UK President, Mr. Alok Sharma, and co-chaired by Mrs. Damilola, the Secretary General of the UN Secretary General, and the CEO of the Sustainable Energy for All. The ETC comprises of leaders of international organizations, multilateral development banks, and other global development partners that are working heavily in the field of energy. The key 5 elements of the energy, or let me talk about the barriers to accelerated renewable development first. 4 kind of key barriers. I'll start with the policy and regulations, of course. Unleashing the policies and regulations is a key to the success of mobilizing finance, attracting private sector work, capacity building, etc., and as well as the subsidies for fossil fuels. The secondly is the technology and the systems and preparedness of the grid, having a smart grid. There's lots of work done in this field and much more we've done with the Energy Transition Council support. The third thing is the finance and investment. How can we attract a large-scale investment to support and to raise ambition through renewables? The last thing is the international cooperation and support, and this is where the role of the Energy Transition Council comes in. That will be through the technical assistance and then finance, mobilizing finance and bringing in attraction from the MDBs and the donor agencies for bankable projects. And then last is the exchange of policy best practices through the Energy Transition Council role. Next slide, please. Thank you. The campaign has 5 elements. This will support countries to phase out coal. This is the main goal on an international level, even though Egypt has done a lot in that kind of front, phasing out coal, and on focusing on clean power, which is the main focus of engagement with Egypt on Energy Transition Council. So that includes more attractive clean energy offers, whether it's in through MDBs and donors, in storage, in green grids, etc. And then the new financial framework that we're trying to propose. As well, there's the product efficiency call for action, which will have a day in the Energy Day during COP26. Next slide, please. This is the establishment from under the energy campaign. We've established the Energy Transition Council to help countries advance and raise their ambition on renewables and reaching their goals. Is when in Egypt's specific case is the Energy Strategy 2035, raising ambition to 42% and above in the year 2035. Thank you. Next slide, please. The overall objective of the Council is to accelerate the transition from coal to clean power as part of the green economy and recovering back better from COVID. We bring in, it's an important moment to bring in the global political, financial, and technical leadership to increase the ambition and to help the power sector over the years to COP26. We are creating this dialogue. We've created the dialogue. We started off with in the first quarter of this year. We had dialogues with different countries. I'm leading on the dialogue with Egypt. We have a lot of support with the Ministry of Electricity and Renewable Energy. I'd like to thank them very much on that. We have achieved identifying key areas in 3 different areas. It's renewable energy, energy efficiency, and innovation and technology. Out of the long list that we've identified, we shortlisted a list of 5 to 6 key areas of support, mainly as a short list, and then short-term, medium-term, and long-term to continue post-COP26. So when we started, that was all going through the identified areas, and then it's been decided upon to continue after COP26 for the coming few years after that. Complementing to that is the phasing up from coal and joining the Fast Power and Coal Alliance. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. So these are some of the members in the Energy Transition Council. We have the African Development Bank, EBRD, etc., and then all the other donor agencies with us. There's a lot of work that has been done in this area. We have grouped the countries into the Africa Clean Power Dialogue. So we had a dialogue for Egypt. We had 3 ministerial events so far from the beginning of the year up till July, and then we're going to have the announcements and the story to tell during COP26 on all the achievements that has been done on the renewables with Egypt and through the ETC, through the support of the donors, as well as what we have created is the rapid response facility to support on a technical support for the projects that has been identified by Egypt. Apart from the country dialogue, we've also had exchange of experience between these countries. So we have Kenya, Egypt, Nigeria, Morocco. So we have the country-specific dialogue or ministerial, and then we kind of shared experience with other countries. Through the continuous working groups that we've created, we've created the dynamics between and the dialogue between the donors, the MDBs, and Egypt, all in one dialogue. The Secretariat, as we said, the UK and the C4All, and then we had the donors, Coalition on Energy Transition Effectiveness. We're trying to build investment confidence and helping smart grids mission. In all areas, in transport, in all renewable area transport. Thank you. Next slide, please. With the Egypt dialogue, specifically, the ETC has provided a unique platform at the national level through a series of multi-stakeholder dialogues that we've carried on that brings together the complex discussions related to policies, technology, finance, all in one place. The various policy, technology, and finance-related challenges that has been identified by the government in Egypt to lead on that dialogue with the ETC has achieved the goals of their keystones to align with their integrated strategy on sustainable energy 2035. So the key driver behind that dialogue with Egypt is the identification of the key gaps and priorities for Egypt, and try to match this with what we can bring in from the ETC members. Next slide, please. The overall goal of our working groups objective is to make clean power technologies a priority option for countries, specifically in this case, Egypt, investing in power generation projects, which is the aim of doubling the rate of global investment in clean energy 2035 and raising their ambition. Supporting people and communities that heavily rely on fossil fuels to make a transition to clean energy by providing them with economic alternatives. And last is achieving that 7th UN Sustainable Development Goal and aligning with the SDGs to ensure the access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for countries and for Egypt. What was the outcome of this dialogue, the intense working groups that we've had over the past 9 months? Was scoping the clean energy transition ambition of Egypt and identifying main challenges. As I said, we started off with a list of more than 16 identified areas, gaps, in supporting Egypt in different areas under the renewable energy, energy efficiency, innovation and technology. Even though with the cross-cutting issues in some of them, like the green grids, smart grids for transport, storage capacities, sovereign bonds, in a whole lot of other areas in their priority areas. We have identified the specific short-term assistance, which would be announced during COP26 from the ETC and the global community that can unlock access to the longer-term climate and clean energy investment to meet Egypt's clean energy ambitions and raise ambitions on a yearly basis. Next slide, please. This was the journey of the ETC. We started off by Q1 and we had the first ministerial co-hosted with France and Denmark. And then we had the second and the third ministerials, each with every announcement and a step forward towards the key outcome that I just mentioned now to announce during COP26. The dialogues were very productive and we kind of identified areas. An example of that was an approval of an action plan, a study for an action plan for green grid and the e-mobility. So with that, I would stop here and conclude my presentation and back over to you, Professor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Munir, for this clear and elaborate presentation. And thank you very much for emphasizing the high level of productive cooperation with Egyptian entities in helping them transfer their ambitions to reality. And hopefully that will be achieved soon with this high level of cooperation and continued cooperation. Thank you very much, Mrs. Munir, for your contribution.
Thank you.
Now I just like to pose a quick question regarding the coordination. I heard that Mr. John Harris would like to speak now. Is that still the case, or should we go with the program as the agenda? Should we go with Mr. John Harris or Engineer Ihab Al-Masri? Is John Harris online with us? Well, apparently,
I think we proceed to Dr. Sobki.
Okay. So now we have our second eminent speaker is Mr. Ihab Al-Masri. Mr. Al-Masri has 35 years of professional experience in the power generation and the distribution, as well as energy efficiency, renewable energy, and climate change mitigation projects, identification and development. Mr. Al-Masri has prepared many nationally appropriate mitigation actions, NAMA, mapping, analysis, and drafting, measuring, reporting, and verification studies for many sectors in Egypt. He also prepared the energy transportation sector GHG emission inventory for Egypt for the fourth national communication document, and also prepared a brief study on establishing the super ESCO concept in Egypt. He has led technical team from different nationalities to develop and implement a $2 million renewable energy project based greenhouse project in Australia. He has worked with many international institutions, and among them is the EU, the World Bank, the IFC, the USAID, the NIDA, UNDP, KfW, the African Development Bank, and the EBRD. He also worked in Egypt and many other countries, including Morocco, Tunisia, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Yemen, Bahrain, Qatar, Jordan, Angola, Indonesia, India, China, Hong Kong, Uzbekistan, Malaysia, Nigeria, Uganda, Australia, and Afghanistan. He also has an electric engineering BSc as well as a master degree in electrical engineering from Cairo University. Mr. Al-Masri, please, the floor is yours. We're eager to listen to you.
Thank you, Dr. Muhammad. But could you please share my screen? I couldn't share my screen. Something happened.
Okay, I will try. Yes.
Here it is. Thank you. Now that's okay?
Yes.
You
put
see
it
my
in presentation mode?
Yes.
Perfect. Super. Thank you. That's
okay.
good. Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to speak about Egypt climate change mitigation efforts. At the beginning, I will have a helicopter view about climate change threat, Paris Agreement, energy transition, results expected from COP26. Then at the end, I will have brief view about Egypt GHG emission indicators and the effort regarding climate change mitigation. Recently, NASA has published this chart, which shows that just in the last 650,000 years, there have been 7 cycles. And carbon dioxide had never been above the 300 ppm, which is 1950 level. Today, the level is 420. Last month, IPCC has released the assessment report 6, part 1. It confirmed that human activities with no doubt causing climate change, and world is likely to hit 1.5 degree warming limit within the next 20 years, above the pre-industrial level. The report has 5 scenarios. Scenario 1 and 2, which is relatively optimistic scenario, where GHG emissions reach net zero in the middle or late this century. And global temperature will be 1.4 degree in the first scenario and 1.8 in the second scenario. Scenario 3, which is the bad, middle of the road, where GHG emission remain high until the middle of the century before starting to decline. By end of the century, the global temperature will be 2.7. The dark scenario, where global cooperation collapse, GHG continue to increase, causing global temperature to reach 3.6. The very strange scenario, where the world does not just fail to reverse its emission curve, but it doubles down on fossil fuel extraction and energy-intensive lifestyle. The world temperature will reach 4.4. Paris Agreement. Paris Agreement is the first ever universal legal binding global climate change agreement adopted in COP21 in December 2015. Paris Agreement sets out a global framework to avoid dangerous climate change by limiting global warming to well below 2 degrees or 1.5. Paris Agreement established an enhancing transparency framework designed to build trust and confidence. Developed countries intended to mobilize $100 billion per year by 2020 and extended to 2025. Energy transition. Energy transition is a pathway for global energy transformation from fossil fuel-based to zero carbon by the second half of the century. It is very important to note that energy transition is driven by policies rather than technologies. To reach the 1.5 degree scenario, global GHG emissions will need to drop by 50% by 2030 and reach net zero by around mid of the century. The estimated cost for energy transition estimated to be $131 trillion between now and 2050. What is expected from COP26? Paris Agreement provides a little guidance on or obligations for how to achieve the 1.5 degree. So COP26 has to secure global net zero by mid of the century and keep 1.5 within reach by accelerating the phase out of coal, for example. 2, adapt, protect community, protect and restore ecosystem. 3rd, very important, developed country must make their promise to mobilize at least $100 billion in climate finance per year. 4, work together, which means that finalize the Paris rulebook, which shows the delivered rules that make Paris Agreement operational. Back to Egypt, GHG emissions indicators and efforts. Egypt in 2018, emissions was 330 million tons. Egypt responsible for 0.7% of the world GHG and 10% of MENA region. Energy and transportation has about 73% of the total Egypt GHG emission. Regarding energy emissions, between 1990 to 2014, the energy GHG emission annual growth rate average was 5.6. But between 2015 to 2018, 3%, which is decline, very good. However, energy GHG emission share in the first period was 67%. In the second period, 72%, which means that energy share is growing. The total emission of GHG in Egypt in 1990 was 129, but in 2018, 329, almost 2.6 times the emission of 1990. There are many transition and renewable energy indicators, but on the left, you can see 2 of them for energy transition. The chart shows the final energy carbon intensity for Egypt, the top line. The second one is the average world, and the blue one, France, as an example. As you can see, Egypt is above the average world and far away from France. In 2018, Egypt's final energy carbon intensity was 108% of the global average, but 181% of France. CO2 emission per unit of GDP was 180 of the global average. On the left, you can see renewable energy attractiveness index prepared by EU. In 2021, Egypt was top 20, but please note that in 2019, we were 14. USAID has prepared a report regarding the Egypt climate risk. The risks in Egypt are three major risks. The first one, decrease in participation. The second one, increase in annual temperature by 2 to 3 degrees by 2050. And the third one, that the sea level will rise by 3 centimeters to 61 centimeters by 2085. Of course, this will have impact on agriculture, water, human health, tourism, coastal resources. Egypt real steps regarding energy transition. Egypt has a energy mix plan, and the renewable energy target was 43% by 2035. This plan is being updated now, and it is expected that renewable energy share will be 61% by 2040. On the left, you can see a table shows the energy efficiency target for Egypt by NEAP2, and it shows that it's 18%. My personal opinion that this strategy must be updated and include other sectors. Regarding electrification and green hydrogen. For electrification, Egypt has already a strategy for manufacturing and dissemination of electric vehicles. And the objectives are in local manufacturing of electric vehicle within 65% share of local components by 2030. Electric vehicle local market share will be 36% by 2030 and 50% by 2040. We will export electric vehicle by 2040. Many other programs and projects are being implemented, including first phase of electric train, Cairo Mineral project, switching to CNG program for cars, and improvement of road infrastructure. Also, Egypt has already issued electric vehicle charging tariff. Regarding green hydrogen, we don't have yet the green hydrogen strategy, but it's being prepared. And in this year only, we have at least three milestones, including study of establishing green hydrogen project, establishing green ammonia and export to Germany, sign MOU for 1 gigawatt green hydrogen project, Egypt planning $4 billion green hydrogen project, and studying opportunity in blue ammonia production. Ministry of Finance already issued green bond. As you can see in the table, that last year, the budgetary cost for the project, $1.9 billion, and include clean transport, renewable energy, energy efficiency, sustainable energy. But as you can see, there was no budget for energy efficiency. And in my opinion, the reason that we don't have a successful energy efficiency in Egypt, that we have to have a successful energy efficiency business, we must have super ESCO established. This is my opinion. Also, Ministry of Finance has already announced that Egypt intends to increase the number and the frequency of its green bond. For private sector, IFC investing $100 million in private sector green bond, which will be issued by CIB Bank. The next few slides just show 4 programs that we can implement and being implemented, in fact, like Dr. Ahmed Mohena has already said about improving the transmission and distribution system. The first one, power plant efficiency. The chart shows the thermal efficiency over the last 10 years and fuel consumption gram per kilowatt hour. If for only 0.5 average efficiency improvement of all power plants, Egypt could save 800,000 ton CO2. Second program for transmission and distribution losses. The table shows, as an example, 3 different EU countries. You can see that the transmission and distribution losses at maximum 7%. But Egypt, for the last annual report, the transmission and distribution losses was 22.5%. Very high, extremely high. I know that there is technical losses and commercial losses. And if we assume that technical losses is only 50% of this number, the 22, and we improve the losses to be by 5%, Egypt can save about 5 million ton CO2. High efficiency appliances. As we all know, electrical energy of residential sector, about 50% of the total electrical energy consumption on the medium and low voltage. Appliances can consume more than 60 to 70% of the residential sector energy consumption. So if we improve the overall efficiency of the appliances in the market by 6%, we can reduce the maximum demand of Egypt by 400 megawatts, save $760 million, and reduce the emission by 1.4 million ton CO2. Flare. I know that Egypt is already working with World Bank for zero flare program. But just to show how much flare we have, in 2019, the flare was 2,500 million meter cube per year, which is equivalent about 5 million ton CO2. Flare can be used for power generation, re-injection, petrochemicals, and production of LPG. I will end my presentation with what Obama said. We are the first generation to feel the impact of climate change and the last generation that can do something about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Engineer Ihab, for this detailed presentation, as well as thank you for pointing out the importance of policies and challenges. And I got a question from the audience, but I will say it now and leave you to answer that in the Q and answer section of the webinar, which has to do with the comparison of blue hydrogen and green hydrogen. So prepare your answer or your comments on that.
Okay.
And the next. I would like to ask now, if possible, if Mr. Osman, Sabr Osman, allows Mr. John Harris to speak first. Is that okay with you, Mr. Sabr Osman? Okay, so our next distinct speaker is John Harris. Mr. Harris has been working for the Chartered Institute for Logistics and Transport for the last 9 years and currently leads an international education strategy and business development. Mr. Harris is a chartered town and transport planner and has over 30 years of experience in sustainable and green transport. He also has he's instrumental in the development of CILT education, training and skills program and partnership working and is responsible for delivering collaborative projects across the world. Mr. Harris is a transport planner, and since 1989, his career has covered planning, accessibility, inclusion, sustainability of transport, fleet logistics, and public transport planning. He has specialized in travel behavior change with highlights including advising on the London 2020 Games, advising the UK government on fleet delivery matters, and working on a number of sustainable urban mobility and rail projects. Mr. Harris also is also a qualified business coach and director of a community rail partnership in the UK. Mr. Harris, it's nice to have you with us, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor, and thank you very much for having me on this important webinar. I'm just going to share the screen, if that's okay, and you should now be able to see the presentation, which is basically a very short presentation outlining a little bit about CILT, but importantly, looking at some of the sustainable transport tools that perhaps we should be looking at. So, first and foremost, a little bit about what I want to focus on for the next couple of minutes. I'm going to just reflect quickly about the big picture across the transport and logistics sector in terms of sustainable transport. Then I'm going to turn to CILT's role in doing that and what we do, particularly some of the local presence in Egypt. And then I'm going to pick on one particular tool, which is the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan, and what that means in terms of carbon reduction and also other effects for the environment. So let's just go back to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And actually, if we want to think about urban mobility and we want to think about sustainable travel and behavior change, actually, if we do that well, it knocks out a lot of the goals, of the 17 goals. So when we think about transport, I always look at it in terms of placemaking. I look at it in terms of the wider impacts on people. Transport is not something divorced from individual choice, and therefore we have to think very hard about what that means for different types of people. So for people that are unemployed, for people that have challenges with social mobility, for people that need to access core services like health provision and education. So in my view, when we are looking at the pillars of sustainability, yes, we can reduce carbon. Yes, we can focus on this environmental pillar, but actually the how you get there is really important. You could introduce measures which are quite strict around vehicle technology, around emissions, around mode of travel, but actually that has a disproportionate impact on people. So, for example, older people, school children, others may actually struggle to make those changes. So I always think of the how you approach sustainability and who you involve and who you influence is as important as the end outcome. So the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan, which I'll come to in a minute, is a really important way of demonstrating that. Now, many organizations, and obviously this will happen across Europe, it will happen in Egypt, and it will happen globally, will have to have some form of CSR commitment. So again, I think it's really important that large organizations, particularly those that are causing travel or could shape travel behaviors of their employees and of their stakeholders, they really need to look at some quite smart transformational things when they look at their transport agenda. So whether that's the recommendations they make to government, whether that's the way the organization behaves on international travel, all of those things are kind of in scope within the CSR agenda. Now, the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport has been going 100 years. We are a professional institute. You can be an individual member. And that means that we encourage everyone that joins us from a student level right the way up to strive for best practice and to aim to be a chartered member. And we operate in 40 countries across the world. And we also have a number of training centers. So you can see on the little map here that we have CILT in Egypt, in other MENA countries, across Europe, in all continents, including Africa and Asia. But also we run training and development activities, for example, in South America, where we've just opened up our work. So CILT comes from a long pedigree. We are about policy influence, but also about industry best practice and training. If we go back to our sustainable goals, the UN ones, interestingly, where CILT is active, there's quite a strong correlation with other organizations that have signed the Paris Agreement. So these are all the CILT branches where we now have a strong commitment in that country for the Paris Agreement. And with a couple of exceptions, you can see a very strong correlation. And if we turn that to thinking about the logistics index and where there is a sustainable development goal relating to industry and economy, you can see there's quite a close match with the green lorries and the amber lorries to the places that have signed up to the Paris Agreement. So very much as an organization, we're trying to influence local policy. We're trying to work with our branch in Egypt, the CRT Egypt branch, in terms of sustainable integrated transport. And we've already started to encourage active involvement in relation to the Cairo Integrated Transport Plan. And just to give a bit of example of the kind of things we influence, this is our latest carbon report, Routes to Net Zero, produced. This is for the UK, although there are messages in here that are globally suitable as well. If you're interested in that, there's one to do with the big issues around net zero, and there's one to do with rural communities as well. And this is the link if you want to delve deeper. Now, in terms of the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan model, this is one that I've worked on for about the last 10 years. I've developed a number of urban mobility plans at city level, at regional level, and also at a sort of micro locality level. And the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan was actually developed as a tool and trialed through a number of European countries. So it's been tested in most European environments. In the UK, there was a special program to actually train and skills build local municipalities and councils and city authorities to really think about this. It did focus very heavily on people at the beginning, passenger transport, and then started to move into the freight and logistics side. So now a rounded Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan will cover both freight and passenger transport as well. It really does work because it looks at people and what people need rather than just modes of transport. And here's some examples of the projects I've worked on. In Gloucestershire, in England, so this is a region of the country, you can see some transport corridors outlined here. And all of these are based on people's needs rather than on sort of bus routes and train routes. This looks at demographics, that looks at where people go for their services and what they feel about their local area, rather than drawing very firm lines on a map and saying, this is the main route, everyone is going to kind of go this way. So it's more of a human map than necessarily a transport corridor map. If we go over to here, the Wrexham Connected one, that is a Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan written for a town in Wales, which was very much around travel behaviour change. And then this one over here is actually a quarter. It's an environment which was run down, needed urgent redevelopment and placemaking. And this is a part of Bristol, which is a city of about 300,000 population. So this Temple Quarter enterprise zone is a special enterprise zone dedicated for high tech and also rebuilding some of the local industry. So you can see the tool works in all different sizes and settings. This is the model. On the left-hand side, you can see that a key challenge is asking a question: what kind of city do I want my children to grow up in? So right at the beginning of this plan making process, the question is a very human question. It's about how people feel, how they respond to their environment. It's not about lots of facts, figures, and sort of transport, sort of algebra and complex stuff. This is around getting to the heart of, is this a place that I want to stay? Is it a place I can move around in? Is it a place I want my kids to grow up in? So that is putting the model very, very simply. And then this is the elaborate model. So what was done is every local municipality that wanted to take part, we audited to see where they were on this wheel. And they didn't have to start at one and work all the way around. If they were quite mature in their urban transport network and in their planning processes, we would start further on. We'd start talking about target setting and how we move things forward. But for those where they wanted a completely blank canvas, we would start and work right the way around this wheel. And it probably took a couple of years to go from blank sheet of paper to having a strategy in place. That's the kind of time frame, because you don't want to rush the people side of this and push people into a consultation framework that that they are not comfortable with. So, in summary, if you want to know more about CILT and its professional services, have a look on our international website that is here. If you want to contact CILT Egypt, this is the information here. The best practice on sustainable urban mobility plan is through the ELSIS project. And there are also other portals, including the Civitas portal, which are well worth looking at. But go to ELSIS and you can download the latest guidelines that were refreshed a year or so ago. And finally, if you're interested in getting some reflections on this urban mobility approach, we have produced some think tank webinars which have been recorded, and they are available on the CILT International media channel. Here's the link, and also CILT in the UK, our branch here has also produced some really good policy and thought places in this area. So that is my whistle-stop tour. Hopefully that's given you some food for thought, and my contact details are on the screen. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris, for this clear presentation, and thank you for highlighting the human behavior and responding to the human nature needs. I have also a question which popped up on the Q&A part, and it had to do with also the type of transport, like going on gas fuel or electric mobility. So if you have some time to respond to that in the clarification,
I will. Yes.
We appreciate that very much. And also another question was on the size. You're speaking about cities or districts of the order of few hundred thousands, but what about cities which is few millions? I mean, would the same approach work for them or not? So I'm just keeping these two questions in front of you so you can hopefully respond to them in the question and answer.
I will do that now. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Now regarding our following eminent speaker, Mr. Saber Mahmoud Osman, and thank you very much for permitting the change in the order of the agenda. Mr. Saber is a climate change expert and former Egypt national focal point for the UNFCCC and IPCC, with more than 19 years of experience in climate change, voluntarily adoption, and resilience. He developed the project document of Egypt Interactive Climate Change Vulnerability Map. He was a member of the developers team of the institutional reform of the Climate Change Council in Egypt to ensure the mainstreaming of climate change in the central government and local municipalities. Mr. Osman also developed Egypt. He developed Egypt National Adaptation Plan (NAP) proposal and submitted it for funding from the GCF and supported the Egyptian government in climate negotiation. He teaches for postgraduate students at the National Planning Institute. Mr. Osman has a BSc in Environment and Biological Agriculture, and an MSc and a master's degree in Climate Change from the University of East Anglia, UK. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. He also has several diplomas, such as Diploma in International Negotiation at Cairo University and Diploma in Natural Resources in Africa from the African Studies Institute in Egypt. Mr. Saber, the floor, Mr. Osman, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sobki. First of all, I'd like to thank the EU project for inviting me to be a panelist in this important webinar. My presentation will be divided to three parts. The first part will shed the light on the climate change vulnerability in Egypt. The second section will present the climate change adaptation efforts that done by the Egyptian government. some international organizations also. And finally, I will go through the Egyptian position in climate change negotiations. So if we look to the climate change impacts on Egypt, Egypt is highly vulnerable to climate change due to many reasons. Its high population density and the high population growth, which place considerable pressures on the country's land and water resources. One of main concerns is the rise in sea level. Future projections show a possible rise in sea levels and have examined likely scenario of 0.5 to 1 meter in Egypt, with the compounding effects of subsidence and convection. 1 meter is the minimum relative sea level rise projection by 2100 along the Nile River Delta coastal zone areas. According to the IPCC, already we reached to 20 centimeter in the meantime, and the sea level rise directly threatens the low-lying coastal areas and related reduced water supplies and loss of fertile agricultural land, which could significantly impact Egypt's economy, food security, and ecosystems, in addition to human health, tourism, and urban settlements. Egypt's intended nationally determined contribution, which submitted to the UNFCCC in 2015, outlined that 12 to 15% of the most fertile arable land in the Nile Delta is negatively affected by sea level rise and saltwater intrusion. In addition, cities, critical energy infrastructure, ports, and industrial zones along the coast are at direct risk from sea level rise. Another primary concern is the potential for decreased flow in the Nile Basin. Egypt already has limited water supplies, and as the third most populated country in Africa, we have now around 100 million citizens with a population growth rate over 2%, around 2% per annum. Water supplies will be even more stressed and further reduced due to increased future demand and stresses due to climate change. A reduction in the water resources will significantly affect our agriculture, which is currently responsible for consuming around 85% of all water consumed in Egypt. And the climate change studies expect that the productivity of two major crops in Egypt, wheat and maize, will be reduced up to 19% by 2050 due to frequent temperature increase, as well as irrigation water deficit and increase in pests and plant disease. In addition to the rise of sea levels and water scarcity, Egypt is suffering already from the increased frequency, intensity, and magnitude of extreme weather events such as heat waves, flash floods, heavy precipitation, and sand and dust storms, with negative impacts on agriculture and food security. As you can see in these pictures and this video, we already started to witness climate change impacts and its economical losses until now is not calculated due to the difficulty to do so. And during the last years, we experienced the different around 3 flash floods, for example, in Sinai and Red Sea areas, 2 heavy precipitation events in Alexandria and Nile Delta governorates and Cairo, 2 heat waves incidents on Cairo governorate, and 3 sand and dust storms over many governorates in Egypt. These complex climate-related challenges will impact human health and national economy. For example, temperature rise and heat waves will have an adverse effect on human health and also threaten the efficiency of solar and other energy infrastructure. In addition, cultural sites and the tourism industry may be damaged due to dust storms and high heat days. The second part will shed the light on the adaptation, what the Egyptian government did the last 25 years to face the challenge of climate change. Actually, many of our scholars published several articles on Egyptian climate change vulnerability and the adaptation efforts. This also collected in different national reports, such as our national communication or second national communication or third national communication, which submitted to the UNFCCC. In addition to that, in 2011, Egypt developed its climate change adaptation and risk disaster management strategy, and submitted also the intended determined national contribution report to the UNFCCC in 2016. And 2 years ago, in 2019, Egypt managed to scale up the National Council for Climate Change to be headed by His Excellency, the Prime Minister, as well as the National Council itself has new structure now. So it consists of 3 levels: the Supreme Committee and the Executive Bureau, and the third level, the Technical Secretariat and Technical Work Groups. If we look to the Supreme Committee, for example, it consists of around 7 ministers. It's headed by His Excellency the Prime Minister, as I mentioned, as well as the members are the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Investment and International Cooperation, Minister of Water Resources and Irrigation, Minister of Planning, Minister of Finance, Minister of Environment, Minister of Agriculture and Land Reclamation, which shows that the government is taking this issue very serious and paying attention to climate change and its impacts on the country. Also, the Executive Bureau has representatives from the same 7 ministries. In addition to the Technical Secretariat and Technical Work Group, which will discuss all technical issues, and it will be like the kitchen for producing the climate change policy in Egypt, as well as proposing any kind of changes in legislations, for example. Also, they will approve the climate change projects, allocate budgeting, for example, because in the meantime, we don't have allocated budget for climate change, but we have allocated budgets for technical ministries like Minister of Agriculture or Water Resources, and they can use their budget to implement some projects. And already we started to have different adaptation projects in place, mostly from our budget. And some of them, like protecting Nile, the funding from climate fund. You see, we implemented different interventions in order to protect the Nile Delta. However, we still need more projects to be implemented. Some of these projects already built on the indigenous knowledge of people and not used advanced technology. Also, in the agriculture sector, we did the same. we started to develop crops tolerant to heat waves and high temperature and salinity. Also, we are working to improve the irrigation systems and use new technologies. And there is a big project now under the Ministry of Irrigation to laying the canals, which will reduce the water losses. However, we still have many challenges related to climate change adaptation. First challenge from my point of view is the institutional fragmentation. However, we have the National Council for Climate Change, but not all the ministries get involved in that issue. Also, the local authorities, for example, we don't have staff working in climate change mitigation or even adaptation on the level of the cities. For example, we have just one city, Giza city, which developed its climate change strategy in cooperation with GIZ. However, the rest of the Egyptian governorates still need to get involved in that process in order to mainstream climate change adaptation among their daily work and their budgeting. Also, we don't have action plan for the national strategy. Already, the National Adaptation Plan project get approval from the Green Climate Fund, and it will start soon. But we need at least 3 to 4 years in order to have national action plan with clear policies and entry points to mainstream climate change adaptation, as well as a package of legislations and actions that will be implemented from the central government as well as from or on the governorate level. Another challenge is the finance. We don't have, as I mentioned, allocated budget from the government for climate change adaptation. However, we have some projects here and there in different sectors, but this issue of allocating budget is highly important in order to start to mainstream adaptation within the central government as well as the local authorities. Also, another challenge is the weak capacity. We don't have enough experts and enough personnel working in the government or even in local authorities. But the good news from my observations, we have trend in the entrepreneurship projects related to climate change adaptation, especially, for example, some projects related to urban agriculture, others related to smart agriculture, and some projects have like co-benefits between mitigation and adaptation. However, still we need more experts in that field. Yes, also we have different departments in universities concerned about climate change in general, but we don't have enough courses and enough degrees related to climate change adaptation. Only 2 universities around the country has 2 programs, mostly the 2 programs related to climate change adaptation in agriculture sector. But we still need to have different degrees related to climate change adaptation in health, for example, and tourism and other impacted sectors. Also, the government published in its biennial update report, which submitted to the UNFCCC in 2019. The proposed MRV system and adaptation is part of this MRV system. However, until now, it's not activated. So we need to have more efforts in that context in order to be able to face the challenges coming from climate change on our economic sectors. And this brings us to the third section of my presentation related to the UNFCCC process. And as you heard from other speakers before me, and as you saw in my presentation, already Egypt is proactive and engaged with the climate change and implemented different projects voluntarily from our national budget. In addition to that, we are engaged in the process of negotiation. And we believe that the negotiation process is not an abstract exercise. It's about
Mr. Osman?
Yes?
Mr. Osman, sorry for the interruption, but it's just like we have other speakers to follow you. So if you can wrap up, please.
Okay, this is just...
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so it's much more than just, as I said, the abstract exercise. It's not about the text and legal commitments. It's about the lives of real people and their welfare. So we believe that the developed countries should do their best to comply with their commitments, especially they have historical responsibility on the situation that we have now. And they should help the developing countries with the means of implementation, finance, technology, and capacity building. They should contribute to this collective efforts in order to be able to face that challenge and curb the global rise in temperature, which negative impacts will affect on all economic sectors, on poor and on rich countries. Finally, I'd like to thank you, and you will find my contact information here. If you need any questions or clarifications, or if you would like to have any of the documents that I mentioned during my presentation, I will be happy to get your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sabar Osman, for this detailed presentation on the streamlining of cooperation between the different entities in Egypt, as well as clearly indicating the gaps which needs to be sort of managed, and that we need to overcome these gaps. Thank you very much for your clear presentation and detailed one. Our next distinct speaker is Mr. Johnson Walter. Mr. Johnson Walter is an energy economist and microeconomist as well. He worked in the World Bank for 26 years until early retirement at a director level in 2014. Since 2014, he worked as independent researcher and consultant. Mr. Walter has worked on many countries in North Africa, the Middle East, Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and East Asia, and the former Soviet Union, including in several periods of political and economic crisis. He has been working on Egypt since 2005. Mr. Walter is in the last 25 years has worked his work focused on energy and climate change mitigation encompassing strategies, project policies, planning, institutional building, and financing. He has very extensive experience in partnership between development banks. Mr. Walter is a senior visiting researcher at the Oxford Institute of Energy Studies and senior associate at E3G, the climate change think tank. His research interests and publications include renewable energy, electricity and green gas, climate finance, energy storage and energy sector, and the political economy of energy. He has a particular interest in the MENA EU clean energy, and he is a graduate of the universities of Oxford and London. I might add myself also that in Egypt here we really benefited from his contribution while working in the World Bank. Thank you very much, Mr. Walter, and please go ahead. We're ready to listen to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. El-Sobki, and it's very good to see you again. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, or good morning if you're in that part of the world. So I was asked to talk about the following question. How much can we expect COP26 to help with financing of clean energy projects? And in a way, it's an amazing question, because we're only a few weeks away from COP26, and the answer should by now be pretty obvious. But unfortunately, the answer is not obvious. We really don't know at this stage. There's a lot of last minute activity going on, a lot of political activity. We see some of it in the media. I think we can be quite sure that what we see in the media is only the tip of the iceberg, that there's a lot of political activity going on that we don't yet know about. But the bottom line is that we can't see clearly yet what is going to come out of COP26. Is it going to be perceived to be a success or not? And most particularly for our discussion, what kind of financing commitments are really going to be made there in a very concrete way, particularly for the energy transition. And as I say, those are really open questions. And before I make more specific remarks, let me just underline that I have the huge luxury of speaking only for myself as an individual, not on behalf of any organization. After a career in large bureaucracies, you can imagine how liberating that can be when talking about something as complex and difficult as this COP26 process. I think, as the last speaker very rightly mentioned, this whole debate stems from a historical responsibility of developed countries towards developing countries that is contained within the UNFCCC agreement, and then has been repeated in various ways in various COPs, and particularly in Copenhagen in 2009, this figure of 100 billion a year became a promise, a commitment from developed countries that they would provide 100 billion a year, starting in 2020, which of course was last year. They would be providing that funding to developing countries. Now, it has to be said that it was deliberately unclear what goes into that 100 billion, because if it had been really clear, it would have been much harder to reach an agreement on the figure. It's not clear what comes from public sources, what comes from private sources, what goes to the public sector, what goes to the private sector, what is for climate change mitigation, what is for climate change adaptation. It's not clear, in particular, how much of the money is subsidized concessional money, how much of it is commercial money. So it's not really very clear how much it helps and for what, but it's become an extremely politically symbolic figure. You know, is the developed world delivering the 100 billion a year, or isn't it? That's the question that people ask. Because it's not clear what's actually in the 100 billion, there's a lot of different views on whether, well, not whether, how much the developed world is off target in making that available. I've seen a whole range of figures in the last few months, but what is very clear, what everybody agrees on, is that the developed world is not on target. It didn't reach 100 billion in 2020, and almost certainly won't reach 100 billion in 2021. And we also have to recognize that when that promise was being made, nobody envisaged that the world would be in a deep economic crisis as a result of the COVID pandemic. And that puts a context on the availability of the financing. And I think everybody will go into Glasgow in a few weeks' time with that in mind. Is the world recovering? Is the developing world recovering as fast as the developed world is recovering? And the answer to that is, on the whole, no. You know, is there equity in this process? Is there economic prosperity underway, or are we trying to compensate for loss of growth? That's going to go into everybody's mindset in Glasgow. So the big question is, what will happen in Glasgow to bring us back on track, or as much on track as we can be at this late stage. It's worth saying, of course, there are some climate funds that have been created as a result of UNFCCC and as the Copenhagen Promise and so on. There are the climate investment funds that are accessed through various multilateral development banks. There's the Green Climate Fund, which is accessed through quite a large number of intermediaries. But in all cases of the climate funds, the demand for the funds is much greater than the amount of money in the funds. And the big question is, will COP26 and after COP26, will that redress that balance? Will the supply of funding be nearer to the need for the funding, the demand for the funding? Let me just say a very brief word on what the president of the COP does as regards this, a very brief word. So of course we're seeing, as I said in the media, we're seeing the UK government, the Prime Minister, also the Minister responsible for the COP. We're seeing them doing a lot of geopolitical activity to get countries to live up to their commitments. It's a very intense process. We don't know if they'll be successful, but we'll try to be optimistic. I think if Egypt becomes the president of COP27 next year, it's going to be a really tough assignment, because we can be sure that COP26 this year won't answer all the problems, all the challenges, particularly the finance issue. Whatever promises are made in Glasgow, there'll be the big question of the role of the president of COP27, making sure that countries deliver on their promises, which is a tough issue and a perpetual issue. So let me end with that thought, since we're in Egypt and talking about Egypt. It's a real challenge to make these COP processes work. And if COP26 is some kind of success, there'll still be a real challenge in COP27. So let me stop there.
Thank you very much, Johnson, for this precise, clear contribution. And let us cross our fingers all for hopefully that COP26 would reach some conclusive concrete conclusion regarding finance. And I hope COP27, when approved to be in Egypt, that will be able, all countries will be able to have a clear mechanism to access finance for the climate change. Thank you very much for your crisp and clear contribution. Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Miroslav Mali. Dr. Mali is an Associate Director, Green Financing Facilities with the Green Economy and Climate Change, the team of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EBRD. He joined EBRD in 2008 after a long and extensive private consulting business. His activities with the EBRD include structuring innovative financial instruments for green financing based on detailed market analysis and targeting all economical sectors like residential, industrial, service, and commercial sectors, and the built environment, as well as the development of renewable energy sources. Dr. Mali also manages green financing facilities consultancies and provide them with technical management and support, including review of project documents before they are accepted for financing by participating financing institutions. After working in most of the EBRD regions in the past, he currently covers the southern and eastern Mediterranean region of the EBRD operation region. And Dr. Mali, we are eager to listen to you now. Thank you very much for your patience and looking forward for listening to you over the next few minutes. Please.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. I can see that the time is that when we normally would finish. So we are going over time. So I will try to be fast. I will try to share my screen. No, I have.
Did you press the share screen button?
I can share it also for you, for Dr. Miroslav, if you like.
Yeah, please do that. Do so. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Yes.
So my presentation is about what is on the table now, more or less. The previous speaker mentioned what we can expect from COP26, and I will try to explain what the EBRD as one of the international finance institution can offer and how we can work on climate mitigation and climate adaptation, and the most important, how we can get to the green technologies, which are extremely important, of course, for tackling of climate change. So next slide, please. So very quickly about the EBRD, for those that are not that familiar, the institution was established as International Multilateral Institution in 1991 and currently operates in 39 countries of 3 continents, of course. North Africa and Middle East is one of the parts of our cooperation, when we operate in 6 countries at this moment. The very important is that the EBRD has a transition mandate, and one of the mandates is the green economy transition. We have new strategy for the period 21-25, where we have really to reach green investment as the most important part of our investments, to go over 50% of our investments as green. But the most important, that there is a new commitment that EBRD by end of 22, all the activities must be aligned with the goals of the Paris Agreement. So this is extremely important, of course, that we do our business as green. Next slide, please. So how we promote green and green technology. So we need to, of course, promote demand and supply. So demand is promoted through policy dialogue, which EBRD is doing with our authorities in the countries, through working on regulatory framework, energy efficiency and renewables. We also have to do awareness raising and capacity building of high-performing climate mitigation and climate adaptation technologies. And also we are trying, of course, to provide some incentives to the companies who would like to follow and to implement these projects. We know that front-runner first implementers, that's more difficult, more costly, and nobody usually wants to be the first front-runner if they don't feel anything getting for that. So we have to find a way, and here, of course, we work with our donors. One of the most important donors for us is the European Union, but we also work with climate funds, as mentioned in the previous speech, like Green Climate Fund. So on the other hand, on supply, it's very important to provide the financing, and this financing by EBRD is provided as a direct financing or indirect through green financing facilities, which I will talk about shortly. And of course, we need also to provide the technologies to be on the market. We provide also financing for production or distribution of high-performing technologies. And we also support the technology transfer. And this is done through Green Trade Facilitation Program, because we have to deal with the barriers and risk of transferring high-performing technologies from developed countries to developing countries. And last but not least, maybe you cannot see it. So we have a tool which is called Green Technology Selector, which helps awareness raising and getting these technologies to clients. So next slide, please. Yes, so the tool which I mentioned is Green Economy Financing Facilities. That's the tool where the EBRD is providing financing to local financial institutions. And why we are doing that? You may remember there was at the beginning of this webinar information that how much Egypt is doing on large infrastructure projects, the power plants, the transmission system, large wind farms. That's one thing, but we need also to go to smaller projects. We need to go to smaller companies, SMEs, residents, and help them to implement these programs. And this cannot be done directly by EBRD, being big institutions. So we use local financial institutions, banks, which know the market much better. So this system, which the EBRD is implementing, is currently acting in 28 countries with through 160 financial institutions, 5 billion. In Egypt, we are also very active. And it's very important to mention that Egypt is one of the most important countries to implement these programs for green investments. Currently, we have about $500 million, euros available in Egypt, working with 5 local financial institutions, leading institutions, for providing these programs. So these are the money which are on the table, and we hope to have more. So it was mentioned how much is needed for green financing. And we said, okay, we have already this amount, and we are happy working with the economic players in Egypt to implement. Next slide, please. So which fields, of course, of the investments we cover? Of course, that's climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation. Specifically, it's energy efficiency, renewable energy, water savings, waste reduction, and new for us, of course, is circular economy, which I think is extremely important in countries like Egypt, and doing with buildings, both new and ones. So these are all where, of course, we are active, and what that needs is technologies. Without technologies, of course, you can't implement it. You need high efficient technologies. Next slide, please. So for that, the EBRD has developed a tool which I think you will find very useful for you, for policymakers, but the most important for companies which need technologies, and also for producers and vendors. It's called Green Technology Selector, which is online platform which can be available both through internet on your computer or as a mobile app, and you can find the technologies which are available on the market. It is in 36 countries, including, of course, we call cement region, which is Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Morocco, and Tunisia. So there is a specific page for Egypt, where all available technologies which meet high standards are available, including who can provide this technology at this moment. Next slide. So here on this, you have links. You can these links work, so you can visit. This is specifically for Egypt. If you click on the link, you get to the page on Technology Selector, and there are two parts. One is global part, where you see what is globally available. But of course, for Egypt, is important to have what is available in Egypt. So in Egypt, we have currently 56 technology suppliers who are registered, and these are big ones. It's not very kind of garage suppliers. These are very big international companies. I don't want to name one because others will be angry. So these are global suppliers, and there are more than 2,000 high efficient products in sectors which are available, and this tool is available in English and Arabic. So there are two versions, and these can be. So practically what we are trying through this tool to help specifically small companies which are not very familiar with procurement. They don't know how to find the technology which is safe, proper for them. They can find it through this tool, which is regularly updated, and working with their provider. That means the bank which they work, they can apply to even to print kind of confirmation that this technology is eligible for our financing. And this is very fast process, and the size of this loan can be up to 300,000, not requiring very sophisticated process. So it's very fast process, and we hope this helps very much for technology transfer. And it's, for example, it's extremely good tool for leasing, because leasing is usually a very swift process. And the leasing companies, of course, do not want to wait a long time for identification of technologies, procurement, and so on. So that's I think one of the ways how we are trying to provide as quick as possible solution for climate mitigation, climate adaptation projects that we have a funding, but of course, in many cases, the issue is what technology is proper for these companies, especially what I'm talking is SME, medium-sized companies, which are not very familiar with these technologies, with the market, and openly they sometimes can be hijacked by vendors offering them something which is very expensive and not proper for them. So here really these are trusted channels for supply. And I also mentioned that the EBRD is providing funding for technology transfer, specific for technologies which of course are not very common in those countries, and there are not that many transfers. So for producers, it's rather risky to send the equipment if they would be paid. So we help also with this transfer of technologies. So next slide. So what is in the technology selector? It's these are technologies for climate change mitigation. That means larger for energy efficiency or renewables, for climate change adaptation, sustainable use of water, So these technologies are there. So this is something which we feel is kind of matured in the system, and these technologies are readily available. And we are working on new parts which we feel are very important, but not that developed on our side, also in supply chains, which is circular economy, pollution prevention, and healthy ecosystem. So this is our target to extend the tool to cover even new sectors, very important, of course, for climate change mitigation and adaptation. Next slide. So this is a snapshot of the page for Egypt. So when you go to this link, you get this page, and you can navigate through all the sectors which are there, and you can choose, and you get the information of the equipment and who would be the supplier, and you can at the end can click print the certificate or confirmation and go to the bank and say, yes, this is the equipment which fits to my needs, and please provide the funding from the program, which is here from the EBRD. And again, our program is not kind of alone. We work with partners, like in current program, we have partnership with European Investment Bank or AFD French Development Agency. And also we are teaming up with the Green Climate Fund. So we are trying, of course, to multiply the available funding, working with other institutions and funds which can provide additional liquidity or provide also concessional co-financing. And last but not least, as I mentioned, we are working with the European Union to provide, in many cases, sweetener, because as I said, to be front runner and to going for something which is above the standard, which is more efficient than normally you would buy. It may cost more money. It may be a little bit more difficult for you to do. So you need to have some sweetener to go for such a more complex solution. So next slide, I'm coming to the end. There's a technical problem. Okay, so I will finish. So the sectors we cover practically are all the sectors of the national economy, starting, of course, from energy, small energy sector, from manufacturing industries, commercial services, buildings. So all these sectors are practically eligible for us for the financing. And again, financing cannot be without having available technologies and having a very quick transfer of those technologies. So very big summary. We have, I would say, sufficient amount of money available at this moment, about 500 million euros in Egypt. We have a tool for technology transfer, and we have as well our participate financial institutions, so we can provide this, and we hope this will be in use for the Egyptian economy to go to the green transition. And we also hope, working with our partners and donors, to do more in the future. And of course, for us, COP26 is extremely important, being part of the family of international finance institutions, teaming up for preparation and implementation of the results of the COP26. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I was not too long.
No, thank you very much for a precise and a clear presentation on ways of financing here in Egypt. And sorry that we went a little bit over time for all participants, but maybe I have two clarifications, or I would like to get the feedback of any of our distinct speakers on. Do you think that the first one is, do you think that reviving the Kyoto Protocol would be a target for COP26? This is one. Regarding different technologies and implementation, and the other clarification is on the area of potential virtual trading of clean energies, renewable energies, developing a financial model to allow for virtual trading of renewable energies without resorting to physical connections. Would that help also in achieving the climate change targets? If any one of you, of our distinct speakers, would like to comment on that, please go ahead, or if they even like to respond to that later on in writing, that would be so nice as well.
Quickly, Dr. Mohammed, for the COP26, mainly COP26, in my opinion, will target to make Paris Agreement operational.
Yes.
We have very good agreement in Paris in 2015. So this is, it has nothing to do with Kyoto Protocol. It will focus on how to make Paris Agreement operational.
Yeah. The scheme of Kyoto might be a way. Anyway, but that's definitely a very valid comment from your side.
Also, Dr. Mohammed, you asked me about green hydrogen.
Yes.
I just added 3 slides to my presentation. If you allow me, I will not present them. I just will show to you, and I will just include in my presentation. And all of them, all participants will have it. I have a type of green hydrogen, a table for cost, and another specific cost in some areas.
Thank you very much.
These are already added to my presentation.
Thank you very much. Would Johnson Walter would like to comment on the 2 clarification I asked, or Dr. Mali, or Ms. Randa Munir also raised her hand. Yes, please, Johnson, go first.
Okay, just very briefly, the Paris Agreement, of course, is a great agreement. Whether it's working really effectively, of course, is something we could discuss a lot. But I would just point out one thing. The European Union, as you know, is about to extend its carbon pricing or carbon taxation, whatever we want to call it, internationally. In other words, to create a carbon border adjustment tax or mechanism, as we're supposed to call it, which, although the European Union wouldn't express it the way I'm about to express it, what it does is supplements the voluntary nature of the Paris Agreement with something that's an obligation, because a tax is, one of the strongest obligations in the world. Personally, I think it's necessary to do that as long as there is appropriate compensation to developing countries that are faced with that border tax. In other words, financing that helps developing countries adjust their industrial base to decarbonize it, which I think for a country like Egypt that has quite a lot of heavy industry that has a carbon content, and some of the products are exported or could be exported, I think that's going to be a very important point and should be part of the discussion with the European Union on the relationship and on the sort of neighborhood policies and so on. But I think it's really important for Egypt and other countries, other developing countries, to focus on, because really it says it's not just about the Paris Agreement, which is a voluntary agreement. It's about something that's not going to be voluntary and can greatly affect some developing countries like Egypt, for example.
Thank you very much. Ms. Munir, Mrs. Munir, please. Mrs. Munir, your mic is muted. Your microphone is muted. Would you like to comment, please? Mrs. Munir, can you hear us?
I think she cannot hear us, Dr.
Yeah.
Subki. Maybe we continue, Ms. Mohammed Saber.
Yes. Mr. Osman, Engineer Osman, would you like to comment on?
Yeah, concerning the Kyoto Protocol, I believe that developing countries, they don't want to kill this protocol because it's very highly important. Especially, we have the adaptation fund as one of its financial mechanisms that support developing countries when it comes to adaptation projects. Also, there are an opportunity for finding another sources for adaptation fund if Paris agreement managed to operationalize Article 16. Until now, the only article that is left without operationalized, Article 6, which is about carbon markets. So if negotiators this year during Glasgow meeting managed to have this article operationalized, we can provide more funding for adaptation fund. We can also provide opportunity for developing countries to start implementing mitigation projects that could benefit the whole process and achieve the target of the Paris Agreement to limit the increase in the temperature.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Engineer Osman, for that. Dr. Mali, do you have final words on that? Thank you.
I think, what is quite important that we as international community work together. And as I mentioned, the new movement, which the EBRD is part of, that is the Paris Alignment, and that's very important that the international community, that means IFIs and the funds, they work together and to work in the countries like Egypt for their targets, and we are trying to do that. So at the end, sometimes what we see is in some countries the projects are not ready. There's a lot of needs also to work on the regulatory systems. Specifically, I see Egypt, you develop extremely well the regulatory system for distributed renewable energy. There are many other countries, even in the region, which are lagging behind, and there is still. So that's one of the fields. Not only working, let's say, on where to find the money, but also to have an enabling environment, to have a demand for this money, that the money are not wasted for very large infrastructure projects. We need to come to the last consumer, starting from residents to small SMEs, because at the end, this is a huge amount of consumption and transport, of course, where individuals have to decide they want to change. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have only Mrs. Randa Munir, if she would like to say any final thoughts or comments. Hello? Well, it seems Mrs. Munir having difficulty in connecting.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Right. All what I wanted to say is we're committed to deliver a successful COP26. I'm just addressing the role again, reiterating the role of ETC, the Energy Transition Council, to deliver, to bring in the MDBs and the donors. So as mentioned by EBRD and others, this would help leverage finance for projects to address the question about financing in COP26, and that will continue after COP26 as well.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Munir, for that. With that said, would the director of the EU project here in Egypt, Mr. Stefan, would like to conclude our webinar, please?
So I first wanted to thank you all for your participation to this webinar. I have taken a few notes, a few pages of notes actually, and some words that are very important, I think, to all of us. His Excellency talked about we are not alone in this regarding adaptation and mitigation of climate change. We talked a lot also about conviction, cooperation. I mean, obviously we are in together, all of us were in together, and I think that's also the purpose of the project that is financed by the EU. Not only the project to support the technical and financial sustainability of the renewable energy and energy efficiency sectors, which is working with both Ministry of Petroleum and the Ministry of Electricity, but also the cooperation from the European Union all over the Mediterranean Sea. They are implementing SICAP, sustainability and energy climate action plans all over the Mediterranean region, including in Egypt. And I think this is the most important thing, that is that we are able to work together, to cooperate. And there was maybe one question I wanted to ask you all, because we are talking about huge challenges. I mean, huge needs in terms of financial means. But if there was one action that you would take right now, one maybe low cost, no cost measure that we could take, for example, in Egypt or in other countries, and that would directly show the local people what we can do at the local level. What would be this action that you would encourage to take? Is that a tricky question?
Maybe from Miroslav, from my experience in Egypt, it's again on the energy demand, on the energy efficiency. I think there has been a long discussion about standards for buildings. So I think the buildings are one of the biggest consumers of energy, and still Egypt, for example, is lagging behind. There are some initiatives, so we would be more than happy working to get to these standards to be set and enforced.
Thank you.
For me, I believe that natural-based solution is the most important approach when we're dealing with the climate change adaptation. So growing trees is not expensive. Mostly you can do it even without money if you manage to get a branch from any tree. And this will be very helpful and will make people in the poor and informal areas are very happy, because when they saw greenery around them, they feel that hope in the future. Thank you.
Yes, Stephen, if you allow me, I can send you an email with detailed answer about your questions.
I knew Ihab, that you would have plenty of things to say.
Because I can give you more detailed.
Thank you, Ihab.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you all for your participation to this webinar, which is the continuation of a long series and that we hope to continue in the framework of this project financed by the European Union. Again, thank you all for your participation and wish you all good health.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.